Hey there guys, Mr. Chicken Movies here and welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be going through the top 10 worst movies of 2018. If you haven't seen my previous video, the top 10 best movies of 2018, please watch it, because I kind of will hate myself by the end of this video, whereas I'm actually kind of happy at the end of last video. And a couple of rules for this video. For one, of course, this is all my opinion, it's all subjective, you don't have to agree with it. Two, this is movies that only release in the calendar year 2018 that I have seen. In total, I've seen 75 movies from this year, so I'd say I'm pretty well equipped. 15 of those 75 will be appearing in this video. And do me a favour and just don't question why I've seen some of these movies or how I've seen some of these movies. Just know that I didn't enjoy the experience. And before we get into the main video, let's go through a few dishonourable mentions. And they include Venom, Pacific Rim Uprising, A Wrinkle in Time, Skyscraper, and Sherlock Gnomes. On to number 10. Starting off this list is Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Many of you are going to be surprised by this, but I think this film was a complete and utter mess. I think that this film was ridiculous in terms of its tonal consistency. This film had no clue what it wanted to be. Sometimes it was sure it was being really serious and deep. Other times it was really stupid and dumb. Other times it was an adventure movie. Sometimes it was a horror movie. It just never could land any of these tones. It's also weird in terms of character development, which is, I don't think there was a great amount of character development in the first Jurassic World. So in this movie, they just ditch the characters in between films and change them fundamentally. Then they forget to include those very arcs in the film. In addition to that, I think that the plot is really stupid. I think the idea of a volcano exploding on the Jurassic Island does make sense and would be an interesting film. The problem is they only give about maybe 3/4 of an hour to it, and then the rest of it is some really boring stuff. You see, I was kind of okay with the island stuff, but as soon as I got back to America, that is when the film sucked hard. I think the haunted house segment showcased some terrible acting. I think there was no suspense in any of these scenes whatsoever, and the plot managed to jump the shark more than it had before. I think that even though there are some cool shots in this movie, ultimately the film just fails to give any level of entertainment or suspense or anything else. I think this film doesn't know what it wants to be and really proved to me that its only point was to make more. More Jurassic World movies was the intention of this film as opposed to making a good film. And that's why I was really frustrated. I thought the music sucked, I thought that the writing was ridiculously lazy, the plot was dumb, the pacing was terrible, I thought that the final line was so cringeworthy, and ultimately, I just hope they don't make any more of it. Oh god, I didn't even mention the character. There's multiple bad characters. There's the little girl whose acting is just terrible, and what they do with her is just terrible. And then there's also the dumb black dude, whose only purpose is to be a dumb black dude. That was also a really weak and drawn out part of the film. This, in general, it's just a collection of stereotypes and plot tropes and things where the only goal of it is to make another one, and ultimately this shallow mess of a film just didn't work for me, and that's why Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is at number 10. And the award for the worst opening scene in any movie ever goes to The Spy Who Dumped Me, which is a parody of Bond, I think, except from nothing about it speaks Bond in any level. Like I said, this has one of the worst opening scenes I think I've ever seen. The color correction is so unbearably ugly, the scene has no suspense, and this was only in the first 5 minutes of the film. Literally none of the jokes were funny. I thought that Mila Kunis and Kate McKinnon had no chemistry whatsoever. I think that their characters sucked and were really boring. I think that the two FBI, or was it CIA, spy thing, spy organization. I thought that those two were so bland and such boring characters. I thought the villain completely sucked. I thought that the assassin girl was a complete waste of time. They tried to give her one scene of motivation, and she was just completely overshadowed. The action scenes were really poorly choreographed. The lighting was dreadful. Some of the effects were awful. The dialogue was rubbish. Ultimately, this film is just too colourful, too playful to be the film it's trying to impersonate, but it's too similar to that sort of thing with a certain lack of humour to really work. And I basically just blame the entire faults of the film on the dialogue here. I think that if the film was actually funny, then I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But unfortunately, Mila Kunis and Kate McKinnon are pretty dry in terms of their humour. Mostly because every time they say something, they're determined to think that it's funny. And most of the time you can just tell they're ad-libbing anyway. The Spy Who Dumped Me is terrible. And I don't think it's much of a surprise to anyone that it is on this list. The Nutcracker. I don't think anyone expected this to be any good. The Nutcracker in the Four Realms is so embarrassing of a film. It really baffles me as to why Disney decided to make this. For starters, it's directed by men in their 60s, I think, which is just bizarre. I hate the plot of this film. It's essentially normal girl who's smarter than everyone else, goes to a place, but she's special, and because she's special, she can do things, she saves the day, but her acting is so bad that her character was just completely bland, and I hated her throughout most of the film. Likewise, I also hated the actual Nutcracker dude. I think his acting was terrible. I think Keira Knightley, you can tell she tried a little bit harder, but she's still not trying very hard. And as well as that, the main villain of the film, they did not try at all. They just didn't work in any level for me whatsoever. I think the plot structure is really screwed up. I think that the design of a lot of this is way too colourful and artificial looking, especially when they have all this juxtaposition between colours and realms. What's weirder is it's called The Nutcracker and the Four Realms, even though we only visit 2 of them. Then why not just call it the 4th realm, like a normal person would? Then you got Morgan Freeman, who's in it for about 2 or 3 scenes. You got a ton of bigger actors who are sort of trying, but they're given terrible material. No one's motivation really works, and nothing's given enough time to flourish in the film, and ultimately it just looks cheap and lazy. Maybe this would be good as a straight-to-Netflix movie, but when it's made into its own film, it just lacks anything. Like I said, the acting is bad, the film looks artificial, and the plot is ultimately just meaningless. Hence, The Nutcracker and the Four Realms is the 8th worst film of the year. The Cloverfield Paradox. Well, at least this film was straight to Netflix. This is clearly just a film that they plaster the word Cloverfield over, and I'm a bit sick of it now. It's trying to give answers to a question that we didn't need answered. The idea of what is the monster from Cloverfield? What is the stuff that's going on here? And they basically just said, oh, this is what happened. They ripped a hole in space-time, and the Cloverfield monster came out of it. What a lazy description. What a lazy idea. I think that the characters were really bad. The only one I felt anything towards was Chris O'Dowd, because he's actually funny in the movie. Then you've got all of these other side characters, and you can tell they're just quotas that are slowly being filled in. and all the characters are really poorly written. It always cuts back and forth with the spaceship and Earth, and I thought that was really drawn out, considering I didn't care at all for this Earth subplot. I think the horror was extremely lazy. Every generic type of horror is in this film. I felt no sense of tension at all. I felt no sense of intrigue. I didn't feel anything at all. And of course, because this is straight to Netflix, the lighting is terrible, the direction is flat and uninteresting, the dialogue is really lazily put together, and the plot is just generic. Ultimately, I'm really not a huge fan of this Cloverfield series, considering it just seems to be a series of mystery boxes of mystery boxes of mystery boxes. But the problem is, when you answer them using some stupid film that wasn't even constructed to answer these questions, you inevitably are going to make a bad film. And that is why the Cloverfield Paradox sucks. It isn't a Cloverfield film, it isn't a horror film, it isn't a drama movie, it isn't a sci-fi movie. It's just a formulated mess. Hence, it's at number 7. God, you know I've seen some awful movies when Gotti is only at number 6. Gotti is B-Tech Goodfellas, with John Travolta in it. This is like a student film, if that student was getting consistent Fs. And also John Travolta's in it, so what do you expect? He has made nothing but rubbish for the past few years. The dialogue is just hilariously bad. This film just tries so hard to be cool and interesting and exciting, but the film fails in every single level because ultimately there's no sense of style or care or connection to any of this. We're just seeing scenes happen of people talking for minutes on end, with camera work that is just so generic and editing that is equally generic. The lighting of the film is atrocious. In fact, the thumbnail, which uses an image from Gotti, the image in it of John Travolta took me about 5 minutes to try and fix the lighting off because it was so awful. The editing of this film is laughably terrible. The music sucks really hard. The pacing, I mean, God, I nearly fell asleep watching this. This is by far the most boring film of the year. None of the dramatic beats worked in the slightest. It's weird how some of the characters just seemingly never age. And then the ending is just dumb. Ultimately, there was no connection to any of what we were seeing. The dialogue was just so bad. The direction was unbelievably amateurish, the performances sucked. Ultimately, this was just a complete waste of time, and because of that, Gotti is at number 6. God help me, Gotti is at number 6. What on earth is worse than Gotti? I guess I answered my own question there. Yeah, Super Troopers 2. Literally no one saw this except me. And that's because I'm some sad person that went out of their way to see Super Troopers 2 because I knew that this would make it onto the top 10 worst. And oh my god, this is terrible. None of the jokes evoked any kind of humour whatsoever. None of them were even jokes. A lot of this film was just racism and stereotyping. And in general, the film was just annoying. All the characters were just annoying idiots. There was no level of competency to any of what I was seeing. The characters were just so unlikable in this film, and everything they were saying was complete rubbish. The plot of this film is waste time for about 40 minutes, then get into some rushed plot about, God even knows, Canadian black market or something? The idea of Canada becoming America? What? And then to make matters even worse, they just throw in a load of stupid stuff, like them randomly killing things with AKs. Or how about them getting attacked by prostitutes? Or how about one of them being addicted to female hormonal drugs? What? This film just evoked nothing but rage from me every second of it. The plot is cookie cutter garbage. The characters are absolutely terrible and completely unlikable. None of the humor worked whatsoever. The direction and artistic work here shows absolutely no level of competency. This film is just completely unbearable, and I hope to never watch it again. And I hope the people that made this film never work again, because it is honestly that bad. I couldn't stand this film. This nearly broke me. Hence, I think it's pretty fitting that it got a 1 out of 10 and the 5th worst film of 2018. I don't have to watch any more 50 Shades of Grey movies. Yes. And no. 50 Shades Freed ends the stunning series the exact same way it started and progressed. This film, like its predecessors, is terrible. The characters are unlikable and flat. They don't have any chemistry at all. Except for this time it's even worse, because now they're married, now they're doing a load of tame stuff, and essentially all they're doing for 2/3 of this movie is being in love and having sex with each other for about an hour. And then all of a sudden the film becomes Taken, and some guy that you don't remember threatens our... what are their names again? I forgot. Anastasia and Chris. Anastasia is still weak as ever, and Chris is just annoying as ever. This film is completely ambling throughout the film. None of the scenes evoked anything out of me, except for some really, really corny dialogue scenes. One of them is dedicated to how she's not willing to change her email, for Christ's sake. This film has a load of scenes that feel like they're there just to make commercials, in particular for cars. And then as for this final big series-shattering plot in the 3rd act, it really wasn't. It was really boring. I completely forgot who the character was. His motivation sucked. And the resolution of this ultimately just felt lazy. But what do you expect, though? It's a 50 Shades of Grey movie. And I guess well done on ignoring the utter failures that were the first two, and considering to march on making this complete mess, so good on you. But for the rest of us, I want the however long I spent watching this movie back. The answer is too long. So it's completely aimless, dialogue sucks, characters are terrible as ever. What do you expect? It's a 50 Shades of Grey movie. Please kill me now. On to number 3. I dare you to not watch this movie. Truth or Dare was a complete nightmare to watch, but thankfully it gets the Wish Upon Award for Funniest Horror Film of the Year. This film was unbelievably entertaining in so many ways. Unfortunately, none of them were intentional. The acting was really bad. The direction was really mediocre. The plot is obviously really stupid. It's about a load of teenagers that go to a haunted house and are getting haunted by a game of Truth or Dare that they have to play until for the rest of their lives until they die. And if they don't do it, they die. And because of that, we get some hilarious deaths, like someone falling off a table and snapping their neck. This film also has really bad effects that just look like Snapchat filters. It tends to be this sort of thing that happens is that they are about 3 years too late to trends. So by the time they learn it, they realize that no one actually cares. And I certainly didn't, but at least I got a goldmine of humor. This film has so many plot elements that could be easily avoided. The pulse, of course, is just stupid. A lot of the characters have motivation that makes no sense. And as always, one thing that I have always famously hated in movies is, in these horror films, they basically make the villains omnipotent. They basically make the villains all-powerful. And I hate when they do that, because it takes any sense of levity away, because you go, oh, it's gonna win. Speaking of which, the main character in this movie goes through a 180 seemingly off-screen, meaning the end of this film makes absolutely no sense. There's a plot twist I thought they'd be going with, but then they didn't. And for that reason, Truth or Dare was hilarious. I would definitely watch it again, but for different reasons. Skip all the boring scenes and watch all the funny ones, that's all I can say. Yes, I actually did see Show Dogs. It is a film about an undercover FBI cop dog played by Ludacris. And this film, it's obviously for children, but even for children, this is just weird. There are certain cases like the dogs being able to talk, but their mouths just move in an unnatural way. And sometimes it's completely weird how they sometimes can communicate and sometimes can't with humans. I think the effects are really bad. I think they animate the dogs to do things that half the time they're not even remotely doing. The plot is really, really, really bad. They have to go into a dog show so they can win, so they can get some kidnapped panda. This kidnapped panda is all CGI, by the way, and it looks terrible. Let's talk about the dogs. The voice acting is all bad. Shaquille O'Neal voices a dog. There's this tiny dog that it's just... They tried to make a character out of it, but the problem is they exaggerate the character in every way. Plus, that little dog also dabs, so I think that's a reason to make it 1 out of 10 alone. Will Arnett is in this, and he doesn't try at all. And as expected from all these kids' movies, the lighting is completely stale and flat. The camera, for the most part, remains completely still. The CGI obviously looks terrible. The jokes are just insufferable. And the plot is just cookie-cutter garbage. This is clearly made for kids, but no effort went into it beyond there. There are some cases where they just think, it'll be fine, no one will care. The problem is I watched it, and I kind of do care about the quality of films, and for that reason, this film just sucks. The jokes weren't funny, it wasn't entertaining, and it was only an hour and a half long. That was a painful hour and a half. Hence, Show Dogs is at number 2. What could possibly be worse than Show Dogs? Well, thankfully, our good friends at Sony have something to say about that. Slenderman is a movie that came out this year. This would be a hugely anticipated film in 2012, 2013. Not 2018, it feels a bit late there. Now, of course, there was the controversial Slenderman stabbing, where 2 girls kidnapped a friend of theirs and actually stabbed them for the Slenderman. Because of this, Sony got a bit scared and re-edited the entire film. They got rid of so much of it that this film doesn't have any resemblance of a structure, and it really, really shows. This film is directed by some 40-year-old black dude. Okay, great knowing he's writing dialogue for teenagers. This film doesn't really have a plot. The plot of it is 4 or 5 bad actors get hunted down by Slenderman. And like I said in my Truth or Dare segment of this, I hate it when horror villains are omnipotent, where they can do whatever the plot wants them to, and it's just cheating. There's no tension because you don't feel intimidated by the villain, because you know he can just do anything and you know he is going to kill them. And because of that, Slenderman is just horrible to watch. The core plot of this film is a series of idiot teenagers decide to look up a video that will summon Slenderman. So they go and summon Slenderman for the sake of it, and then they die one by one. And it seems they seem to die in an order of good acting, so by the end of it, you're left with the 2 worst actors, which is great. As well as that, this seems to just rip off The Ring in terms of its plot. All the scares are just taken from anywhere else, literally anywhere else. The Slenderman is hardly in it. A lot of the stuff you're seeing in the trailer, by the way, isn't in the film either. Most of this film is just people talking about the Slenderman and then getting scared by the Slenderman. But the thing is, we don't care because this film doesn't have any characters. All of the acting is horrendous in this film. None of the characters feel like people because the dialogue is just so poorly written. And it just sucks so hard. The dialogue is beyond dreadful. This is the dude they chose to write that dialogue. Does it look like he is in touch with the youth? This film lacks any realism, it lacks any protagonist, it lacks any meaning, it lacks any impact, it lacks any feel of any atmosphere. The film's plot makes no sense, the acting is all horrible. The film is just sloppily directed, none of the plot makes any sense, the Slenderman is just ridiculously powerful, and ultimately there are no stakes or anything to this film. It is just a product, a cheap product, that's only goal is to attempt to creep you out. Some people might get creeped out by this movie, but that's all it is. They're showing you images of things that have already been established to be creepy. That is it. That is the only thing that this film does to try and scare you. Well, that and jump scares, but jump scares are cheating. I finally found quite a good analogy for jump scares, which is, it's like tickling someone during a comedy. Of course they're going to laugh when they get tickled, but that doesn't mean it's any good. My god, this movie is just horrible. I don't think there's a single thing that works in this film, and I just feel insulted that they even made it. This film has no redeeming qualities whatsoever, and ultimately, no one should ever watch it. It was only an hour and a half, yet it felt like it was 3. This film is just boring. It lacks atmosphere, and ultimately, I never want to watch it again, or anything that's half as bad as this ever again. Hence, Slenderman is the worst movie of 2018, and I guarantee that will never change. Heck, not the worst movie of 2018, it's probably one of the worst movies of the decade. So 2018, no I didn't see Holmes and Watson this year, so I'm sure it would appear on this list, but let me know if I missed out any terrible movies. The chances are I won't watch them because I don't want to. But anyway, let me know about your opinions on these movies, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, check out the top 10 best movies of 2018, and like I said, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, like and comment, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.